G'day Legends, Blake here with another video, and recently I had a whole heap of colonies just randomly stop breeding here in the fish room. It can be so confusing, so frustrating, and can really disrupt your love for the hobby. So today I want to run you through some of the troubleshooting that I do whenever a fish colony stops breeding. So let's jump straight into the video. Okay, so for me, when I consider why a fish is or isn't breeding, the main thing is they need to be comfortable, they need to be healthy and well conditioned, and they need to have an appropriate location to breed. So the first thing I think about with those things in mind is what has changed to spark that difference in breeding frequency.
Welcome to my humble chamber, or as I call it, the Love-nasium. Pagan.
The first thing might be diet. Are you feeding more or less live and frozen foods? Have you switched to a different pre-prepared food? Have you checked the dates on all of your pre-prepared foods? Too often we can feed stale foods, out-of-date foods, or change to a food with a lower protein content, and that's just going to be more difficult for those fish to produce a high quantity of eggs unless they have calcium and protein availability within the diet.
Oh, now we're talking.
The next thing I like to think about is temperature. Sometimes even if you're heating a room or heating a tank, the coldest winter nights or the hottest summer days can really have an impact on that temperature. So what I like to do in that case is check, come into the fish room at the middle of the night in winter or the middle of the afternoon in summer, and just make sure that you're not having those fluctuations outside of the norm of what your fish experienced in the period of time that they were breeding successfully.
What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age!
If we're comfortable with the diet and the temperature, the next thing I like to check is the water. Have you increased or decreased the amount of water changes that you're doing, or the volume of water changes you're doing? Check with your local supplier of water as well via their website in case they're flushing the lines, adding additional chemicals or additives into the water that you might not be aware of, and not running into things like ammonia or chloramine, things like that you might not be used to in a normal sense. Check how long the duration that these things are going to be added for, and adjust accordingly, whether that is refraining from water changes for a while, collecting your own wet rainwater and using that for a water change, maybe running everything through an RODI filter and then adding appropriate additives into that water. Whatever you can do to get around that. It's a really tricky situation that hopefully not too many of you have to deal with, but it is something that does come up every now and then regardless.
Yes, science!
The next thing I'd be concerned about is, are the fish unusually scared? Has something in the tank maybe got to a size where it can now be considered a predator? Have you added some more fish in there that are active at night and are keeping the other fish up during the day? Or are you, as the person who's excited about all this breeding, are you pressing your face up against the glass more frequently?
Here's Johnny!
Other things that might upset, have you changed the lights recently? It might be a bit too intense now and they're being spooked away from coming out and going and doing their usual spawning routine. Have you added larger fish to the tank next to them and they can see into the tanks next to them and they're threatened by that? It might be a good idea to place some dark card alongside the tank so that they feel a lot more safe. All of these sort of disturbances can really spook fish. They've got nowhere really to go, so it is a good idea to leave well enough alone. There is an old saying that a watched pot never boils, and I think the same thing can be said about fish. If we're constantly in there tweaking things, messing around with things, then you can upset the balance by simply spooking them every single day. So if you can resist, then leave them alone and they might get back to business.
Leave Brittany alone!
Or have they got appropriate caves and areas in which to spawn inside the tank? These are all important considerations that you want to have, and just consider any real environmental change that might spark the difference. The next thing I'd consider are conditions inside the tank. Have you added any more tank mates? Have you added any more fish? whether they are the same species or not, and introduce any diseases. It's a good time to keep an eye on sunken bellies and things like that, because if the fish do have internal parasites and worms, they might look pretty fat and plump, but in actual fact they're probably really starved of nutrients, and that's not going to help egg production whatsoever. So it might be a good idea to run some dewormer through if they are looking a bit thin. Have they got any external parasites like ick or anchorworms or anything like that? That might be a good idea to treat for that sort of thing. Overall, just make sure the condition of your fish, they look nice and healthy, the shape they're supposed to be, and have some nice coloration, and that'll be a good sign as well.
What was that?
Oh, I have a parasite. Yeah.
Parasite?
Yeah, it's a term of endearment, that's all.
Apologize!
No.
For example, in my situation, I found a whole bunch of dragonfly nymphs, which are a predator that dragonflies lay. They stay aquatic for about 6 months or so, and they do eat small fish, daphnia and things like that. So keep an eye on really strange, small, creepy crawlies within the tank that might be upsetting the balance as well. Has the aquatic plant situation inside the tank changed at all? Did you do a big trim and take away some of the hiding spots of the fish, spook them in that way? Did you put a new plant in there that has upset the balance in that case? Or did you take some out so that you could see the fish better? In my experience, depends what fish you're trying to breed, but with egg scatterers, especially if you're using my egg breeder box that I've spoken about before, then I found that more plants actually meant that they weren't using the breeder box, and I suspect they were laying their eggs on plants in the background of tanks. So if you want them to breed in a specific area, like on a spawning mop, then it might be a good idea to peel things back. And whilst I always suggest more plants rather than not enough, in the case of using spawning mops, spawning platforms and things like that, it actually might be a good idea to put less plants so that they know the specific areas that you're wanting them to breed in. If you're not too fussed about that, then the more plants the merrier, and that will certainly help them to feel a lot more comfortable as well. If all of those things are fine, you've done nothing differently, you've checked for pests, you've checked for diseases and infestations of different things, you've got the appropriate environment there, you've got the right number of fish, and they're not at risk of predation, your behavior has stayed the same, and the water parameters are all fine, although we hate to say all water parameters are fine, but the temperature is all good and everything else is okay, well, it might be a good idea to just do a quick reset. I've found in times that fish can get a little bit comfortable in their surroundings, and it doesn't hurt sometimes to just take everything out of the tank, do a large water change, maybe a little bit of cooler water, and in my instance, I pulled back 4 of the aquariums you can see behind me, and 2 of the 4 had eggs the next day.
Eggs.
Right. Just like the ones that rooster was gonna lay. Only roosters don't lay eggs, do they?
Don't they?
Doing a large volume water change, a filter clean, we can make sure that those nitrates aren't going to creep up. The tank's reset so the fish sort of know what they're there to do, and they know that there's something going on, but they're just sort of out of that comfort zone again. It might seem a little bit contradictory when I'm talking about comfort zone and not walking past the tank and so forth more than you have to, but for this instance, I think it's okay to disrupt the comfort zone once in order to spark some sort of change, but a constant disruption of the comfort zone for me is not a good idea, because that's going to cause stress. So I'm talking about a once-off disruption to the comfort zone, but I think that sometimes that can sort of spark a change within a colony. So yes, if everything has gone to plan, I packed down the entire aquarium, take out everything but what is in there to spawn on, whether that be sort of a terracotta breeding cone, a breeding platform, spawning, whatever it is, put in the sponge filter, clean it out, give it a nice, nice clean so that it's not putting debris everywhere. Make sure that the tank is nice and very clean. Make sure that there's no pests. It's a good idea to search for them at that point in time, especially ones that are really hard to see. Bit of a cooler water change, and a nice feed of some high protein food, obviously depending on what fish species it is, but I often find that after all that work, and it is a big effort, you will often have spawns within the next day or so, and from that point in time, they can get back to usual. So there you go guys, those are my tips for what to do if your fish have stopped breeding. Really hope you can get to the bottom of it really quickly. I know it's frustrating, but sometimes a big reset is all that we can really do. But main thing is to just keep in mind what has been the catalyst, what has changed recently that might be spooking these fish, making them otherwise uncomfortable, or what's changed from when the period was successful to now being unsuccessful. Another thing to consider is the fish's age. Potentially the fish aren't getting to a point where they're aging out of that breeding zone, and at that point in time it's a good idea to start filtering in some younger fish to keep that colony nice and refreshed. Again, it depends on the species, but yeah, hopefully these broad tips do help you diagnose what is going on. If this video was helpful, or if you liked it, it always helps me out to smash like, hit subscribe, and all that fun stuff. Thanks heaps for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.